This is the Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast with Nick Cattles.
It is the Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast with yours truly, Nick Cattles. Through 12 practices, Greg, it's time to talk some Patriots here, getting ready for the first preseason game tomorrow against Washington. The biggest news of the week up to this point, Hunter Henry. He's injured. It's a shoulder, out at least a couple of weeks. Your thoughts so far as the tight end goes?
It's not great anytime you have a new guy, especially that you gave a lot of money to, miss time with the quarterback position up in the air. It's not good that he misses time, but look, I'll say this. Not the world's greatest blocker, so I don't know how much he was going to be asked to do that anyways. What you worry about the shoulder. He could still, I expect him back in plenty of time for the season opener. He could still go down the field and be a seam threat, red zone threat. That's sort of what you're going to get out of Hunter Henry. You do worry about his injury history, that this is just another injury on top of the list, a guy who's never played a full season in the NFL. So those are definite concerns. But look, the timing of the injury it was good. He'll be back in plenty of time. I don't expect him to miss much of a beat just because I don't think he's going to be asked to do a whole lot of heavy lifting in this offense, given that he's a little bit limited as a blocker. He's more of a backside seam threat. So not optimal, but not the end of the world.
Yeah, the biggest concern is what you hit on, the history of injuries. And if this is just a continuance of it, it feels that way. They dumped a lot of money into him. So you hope that he gets healthy and he stays healthy. All right, Greg, let's move on the offense. A lot of people talking about N'Keal Harry, what he's done at camp so far. Is there a legit reason to be excited by what you've seen?
Yes, but we're kind of grading on a curve, Nick. He's a guy that we didn't see much of out of the first two seasons. First round pick, 32nd overall, which is really a second round talent. But in any event, he's gotten off to a really good start. He's doing what you expect him to do, what the Patriots drafted him to do, which is be physical, back shoulder, bully guys, run after the catch. You see more and more of that. And I think I remember you and I talking in minicamp where a lot of people were dumping on N'Keal Harry. And I was like, I kind of like what I've seen out of him, especially after the catch. He looks a little bit quick. And that's continued. Now, however, there's a big caveat with this, is that in the past couple of team practices and team drills, 11-on-11s, he's kind of disappeared. He's not getting the ball. He's not getting targets. This is what you're afraid of with N'Keal Harry. So he was doing a really nice job. I don't understand what the disconnect is now. Perhaps it's about him not being able to get open with consistency or quickly, and some of the quarterbacks are backing off. But I thought he did a really nice job when Agholor was out of practice for whatever reason. N'Keal Harry stepped in, had a good practice that day, and then sort of it's been quiet ever since. He needs to keep rising his level, or he's going to be back to just having a so-so role in this team.
Yeah, you and I both believe he can be a productive player on a team. It's just, do they play him in the right spot? Can he get open consistently? Do they trust him to throw at him with, a contested catch up in the air sometimes? And do you trust him in the red zone? That's really what it comes down to. I mean, relatively speaking, I think both of us believe he could be productive, not maybe as much as people thought he was going to be, but we'll see. It's all about consistency. And as you said, can he keep that trajectory going as camp goes on and the preseason goes on? We'll have to wait and see how all of that gets figured out down the road. All right, let's get to the quarterback play. Of course, everybody's talking about the quarterbacks. How are you feeling about the QB play since week one of camp, Greg?
Pretty solid. I like what I've seen, Nick, out of both guys. I was thinking this the other day, where they really didn't have their first meaningful camp practice, and I know you and I talked about it when I said they haven't done jack squat, and some people out there, some overly sensitive radio people out there who don't like criticism, and instead of just answering back at criticism, poke fun at people, we're saying things like, oh, it feels like Mac Jones is being lapped or Mac Jones might be a bust. And I told you at that time, they hadn't done jack squat in practice yet. It wasn't real training camp. No matter how many stats people are throwing out there, it wasn't real. It
Right.
was a buildup. And we finally, trying to think what day it is now. It was Sunday, it was Monday. Monday's practice was the first real training camp practice where you had skill development, then they worked against cards for Washington or possibly for Miami in the season opener, where they literally hold up cards for the offense or the defense to run scout team plays. And then they got into real game situations where Cam Newton was given a drive with the ones against the one defense, or at least basically they go, because those drives last about 10, 12 plays. So they swap out the offensive line and some of the defensive line after about half the plays. So that was the first significant drill. And here's what's really significant, Nick, to me, and it looked purposeful. And to me, it tells me there is definitely at least Bill Belichick is leaving the door open for a quarterback competition. And that is, so they came out and they each got drives. Started about the 25-yard line. They get about 10 plays. Cam Newton came out with the ones, then they swap out. Now, normally, if it's a situation where you have a starter and a backup, then the backup comes out with the twos right after that. What happened in this Patriots practice? Brian Hoyer came out with the threes and had a drive. And that left time for all the starters to rest, get their proper rest, hydration. Then once Hoyer's group was done, then Mac Jones came out with the ones against the one defense. That is significant. It's very significant. And then later on in practice, they did 2-minute drill. First time we've seen it full action, 2-minute drill, where Cam Newton was with the ones against the ones. Mac Jones was with the twos against the twos. Mac Jones did a better job. But those, I'm just telling you this because that's like in a normal year, that's like day 3 of training camp practice.
Right. Yep.
Now it's day 11 that they're doing it on. So it's just the timing on everything is just so far off. But all those people who were, listening to some people who were clutching their pearls and all worried about this and that, just, take it easy, calm down.
Relax.
The real competition didn't start till this past weekend. And is there time for Mac Jones? I don't know. We'll have to see. What the Thursday night preseason game will be a big indicator, and then the joint practices. But finally, we got the significant quarterback play, and Mac Jones played better.
All right, so the first week or so of camp was kind of just the guys out there. I mean, you saw it down in Houston. I don't know what they're doing with Deshaun Watson. They actually had him messing around at safety through the first couple of days. I mean, I think the entire NFL knows that the early camp process is completely different now than what it used to be. With all of that said, you just kind of mentioned Mac Jones playing a little bit better. I know in your notes, I was looking over some of the notes, and you said that he is coming on, quote unquote. Your thoughts on his progression and what you've seen as of late from the rookie?
I think it's been, I'm trying to think of the right term. I don't want to say great. I think it's been very good. It's been pleasing if, you're looking for a guy to fully operate this Patriots offense. Now, I think Cam's done a fine job, and I think he's the starter right now. We'll see what happens. But I do think that Mac Jones, it was sort of baptism by fire. In that I think the Patriots maybe didn't get to some of their red zone stuff in the spring. They started to finish the install there very early in camp. And that was a tough chore for all the quarterbacks, especially Mac as a rookie going against the Patriots defense in the red zone. And so he had times where he struggled. But since that time, since they really started to move forward with the offense, with the passing offense, Max looked really steady. He's done a really nice job. Sometimes he hangs on to the ball a little bit too long, and I'll be interested to see how I think he's going to have some plays, Nick, in the preseason where you're just like, holy cow, this game's too fast for this kid. Or like, he doesn't realize how fast these guys are. He thinks he can get away from this guy, and he's going to have those moments. but he needs to go through them so he learns from them. I think he's done a really good job of slowly ascending here. I think that he's everything the Patriots are throwing at him, he's doing. The 2-minute drill, he was in complete command. He was very loud. He was very assertive. He moved very quickly. He had a much better drive and 2-minute drive than Cam Newton did. I think he's in a really good spot. And now, to me, you look to see him translate that success into a game. And then that will set the stage for what happens in the joint practices with the Eagles and the Giants. And if Bill Belichick thinks Mac Jones has a chance, and he does, we have like a month until the season opener, then I think you're going to see him get prominent roles in those joint practices.
Yeah, I think you and I are ready to be patient for Mac Jones. We understand the rookie quarterback transition, how they have to progress. I don't want to go too far forward here. I don't want to go crazy, good or bad, with Mac early on, but it's 2021. So I am totally ready if Mac Jones plays well on Thursday night for the people to go crazy on Twitter. If he plays bad on Thursday night, I'm ready for people to freak out and have dumpster fire gifs all over the place on Twitter. That's the way of the world. You and I trying to be patient with this guy. With all of that said, Mac's coming on. He's trying to make a little bit of a charge here. As you said, he's been ascending. This is a big period the next couple of weeks. We've got preseason game number 1 tomorrow night against Washington. Then we have the joint practices. So my question to you, if you're Cam Newton, Greg, what do you have to do to keep your job over the next couple of weeks?
I think he needs to be efficient. I think he needs to throw well in the games and take care of the ball. I mean, we've seen moments like in that 2-minute drill where Cam held the ball for 5.93 seconds before getting set. His last couple plays in that 2-minute drill were he tried to throw a late out to Jonnu Smith that was picked off by Adrian Phillips, and Cam Newton sort of held his helmet in his hands. Then he held it for 5.93 seconds, and Josh Uche sacked him.
That is a lifetime. 5.93.
Yeah. From about the 5-yard line too. So he can't do any of those plays, Nick, in the preseason. He needs to come out and operate the plays that are called, execute them with good timing. And if he does that and run when needed, if he does that, then I think Bill Belichick is like, all right, with a strong defense and a running game and weapons that we get the ball out of the quarterback's hands, Cam's the right option for me, at least to start the season. I feel comfortable with that. We can stay in games. We can win games. We'll figure out a way to win games late. But if he comes out and he's not seeing the defense, he's not seeing the progressions, he's holding the ball, he's late, accuracy wanes, then all of a sudden I think Bill and what if Mac is playing well, I think Bill's like, all right, we need to quicken this up with Mac because I'm not going through this again with Cam. I think Thursday night is bigger, in my opinion. I think it's bigger for Newton than it is for Mac Jones.
Yeah, because you feel if Mac doesn't play well, it's excused. It's his first preseason game. He's still learning. Again, we talk about progression, get ready for a couple of obstacles getting in his way. So you can look at that and say, yeah, okay, first preseason game, kid got it under his belt. Let's see what happens the next couple of games. If Cam goes out there and looks like a disaster, then you say to yourself, I mean, you got a vet here of 10 years or so, former MVP, somebody who's trying to keep his job, and he looked completely unready and unprepared. Then yes, I think you do draw more from Cam because he has the resume, he has the track record, and now we have expectations for him as a veteran playing preseason. I mean, you got to be good in these games. If you're not good in these games and you had the season you had last year, then yes, we look at it, I think, differently, and we should look at it differently. Speaking of differently, you've kind of mentioned already a couple of times how different this camp has been compared to prior camps. Do you like how Belichick has handled it? Does it make sense to you the way he has handled it up to this point?
A little bit. I'm still a little bit disappointed in that. Look, I understand the constraints of the rules, but do we really need 2 stadium jog throughs in the first 12 days of camp. There's not another alternative. I mean, I don't know. Is this Robert Kraft trying to tell Bill, like, look, with the pandemic, and we don't know what's going to happen with the Delta variant. Hey, can we get some outdoor stuff that fans can go to and get into Patriot Place? And I don't know. It's the second one was weird. The one last night was weird. That we're back in again. This time for a free practice. They had half the lower bowl sectioned off. I would say of that lower bowl, it was only half full. I mean, if this was Tom Brady conducting a practice, it would have been, people all over the place. Not that matters to me or anything, but look, we understand the constraints with, all right, we couldn't be in pads till the only constraints that I see in the CBA from there on out is you can't do pads for 3 consecutive days. Well, I don't think the Patriots have threatened going 3 consecutive days in pads in like 5 years. So I'm not all that worried about that. But like, let's get going. Like, once you get a chance, like, get them in pads. Let's go. I just wish they'd press the envelope a little bit more in terms of the contact and ramping things up. And again, like I said, the second in stadium practice, I don't know what the point is. They have today off, then the preseason game, which is at night. Why you couldn't practice in pads again on Tuesday instead of in the stadium? You couldn't practice in pads and hit each other and then take today off, and then you have the game on Thursday night. I just wish they'd press the issue a little bit more.
What's interesting to me is how our head coaches across the league going to handle the preseason. And I think you can also put camp into that as well. Last year, you didn't have much of camp at all. You had, 10 practices. You had no joint practices. You obviously had no preseason. I don't think the product suffered as bad as I thought it was going to. And I think the product surprised some people within the game of football. And I just wonder if, as far as the early period goes, if coaches are going to be a little bit lighter on the guys, especially if you have, veterans and guys that have had injury histories, Hunter Henry. Yeah, I wonder if a lot of guys around the league that are head coaches are going to say, all right, we don't necessarily have to ramp it up right from the get-go, because we saw last year with just 10 practices, no preseason, no joint practices, the product was still pretty good and we still played pretty well. So, maybe there's some of that as well. All right, let's get into the preseason game. Numero uno. Of course, we only have 3 of those this year, Greg. We added a regular season game. We took away a preseason game. I love less preseason games. So let's look at this. Washington against the Pats. Now, we start with Ron Rivera. Ron Rivera over the weekend came out and said, I'm going to play my guys. Again, this goes back to what I was just mentioning, how head coaches are going to handle the preseason and camp. Matt LaFleur in Green Bay said Aaron Rodgers is not touching the field. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be case by case. Rivera says he's going to play his guys, including Ryan Fitzpatrick. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think it's good. I mean, I think that these coaches realize they have to get themselves some, contact and things like that, and put them in the situations. It's been a while. They don't know how things are going to go. You don't know when guys are going to get dinged up, so you try to get them to go out there and play together. I think a guy like Rivera, and I think you could put the Patriots in this category as well, where Rivera is trying to build a program there with Washington. He got off to a good start in year 1. Belichick's trying to rebuild his program here in New England with a lot of new faces. I don't think any of these guys have earned the right to stand on the sideline and watch preseason games. And the only way you continue to build a program is guys playing together, being out there. And so I don't know how much the Patriots starters are going to play. I think it's a case-by-case basis. We already saw in practice the other day that, look, I don't think Andrews is going to play with whatever. He just had a birth of a son, but also I think he's dealing with a hand injury.
Yep.
A guy like Trent Brown I saw get pulled very quickly yesterday. So there are some guys, it's a case-by-case basis on what's going on. But I think this is a really good work opportunity for the Patriots, especially the offense, because this is a damn good Washington defense with some really talented guys on it, and they're going to be put to the test.
Yeah, I think when I look at this matchup, for preseason matchups, I kind of see Greg Bedard looking at these rosters, licking his chop, sweating, wiping it from his brow, because what you have is you have a defensive line in Washington, which should be a top 5 defensive line this year. I mean, they are stacked, very similar to San Francisco a couple of years ago. They have invested heavily on that defensive line. It has paid off for them. So you've got a top 5 or so defensive line in Washington, but then you've got the Patriots' strength. You mentioned Andrews might be out tomorrow night. You mentioned Brown might not play a ton, but on paper, top 5 D-line, top 5 O-line. This is your kind of game, Greg.
Oh, man. I was just looking at the lineups last night, putting this together, and I started sweating a little bit. I started breathing a little heavy. But I mean, Chase Young versus Isaiah Wynn and Montez Sweat against Trent Brown. I mean, for a preseason, I mean, even if we only get like one drive of that, that's worth the price of admission right there. And then you got the Alabama guys, Deron Payne, Jonathan Allen against Owenu and Shaq Mason. Whew, man, I'm hyperventilating.
Allen is a stud.
Thinking,
yeah, if you haven't seen Allen play, he's a top 3 inside guy. And with Kansas City moving Chris Jones, thank you. I was thinking Chris Young for some dumb reason. Moving Chris Jones to defensive end, you could argue that Allen is the second best defensive tackle in this league behind Aaron Donald. He gets pressure consistently. He gets doubled consistently. That cat can play. Chase Young gets the headlines, but Allen does some of the dirty work. Yep. I agree with you. That matchup is a lot of fun. Speaking of defensive linemen, Christian Barmore, people seem to be very impressed by him. He has been dinged up. Nelson Agholor has been kind of in and out of practice the last couple of days. Do you think we see those two guys? And if we see them, how much of them do we see?
I think I can't tell exactly what's going on with Agholor, so maybe it's possible he's out there. But normally, if guys are in and out of practice right before a preseason game, they hold them out. Now, that being said, I remember a couple of years ago, as a rookie, N'Keal Harry was thrown in there while he was dealing with something and was basically lost for half the season.
Yep.
Not smartly, in my opinion. Maybe they learned a lesson from that. Agholor, I'm not sure what's going on. We could possibly see him. Barmore, I don't know. Look, when he's on the field and he's at full strength, holy cow, can that guy rush the passer from the interior? I mean, in one-on-one drills, he's basically unblockable. That being said, he's only gone against a starter once so far in camp. That was Owenu, who's just a second-year guy, good second-year guy. I think Barmore beat him, and he's looked really good. He's even gotten some time in base defense with the starters, which is very unusual for a rookie. That being said, he keeps going in and out of practices, and I'm sure it's no fault of his own, but I'm just telling you how coaches sort of look at it and just be like, if Jim Whalen, the trainer, is in Belichick's ear every other 10 minutes of practice being like, yeah, Barmore's got to sit out. He's got this. Like, Belichick's going to be like, he's going to be like, forget that kid. We're moving on to somebody else. So it's important that he stays on the practice field. I don't know what went on at Alabama. I'm not saying that, anything's going on, but he just has to know if Belichick's the one who coined it. What is it? Availability is the best ability.
Yeah.
And he needs to stay on the football field because he's a damn good player. Stay on the football field.
It was Parcells, right, that said can't make the club in the tub. So there's another one. Can't make the club in the tub. All right, so if you're Josh McDaniels, let me pick up my little piece of paper here of notes and put it in front of my face like I'm an OC. So tomorrow night, I'm Josh McDaniels. I'm looking at my play sheet. I'm getting things ready. I've got 3 quarterbacks. We're not too worried about Brian Hoyer or whatever with that guy. But we've got Cam and we've got Mac. How are the QBs deployed tomorrow night if you are Josh McDaniels, Mr. Greg Bedard?
I think at the direction of Bill Belichick to sort of keep the peace and everything swimming along and not to disrupt anybody or disgruntle anybody. I'm starting Cam and most of the starters and going about a quarter. Then I'm giving Mac and the backups about a quarter, maybe start the second half, and then turn it over to Brian Hoyer for the rest. I think that's the way to keep the peace. I don't know if you can say at this point in time that Mac Jones has deserved or earned any more than that at this point. But that might change out of this game, but that's how I would do it.
All right, let's do some rapid fire. Christian Wilkerson getting lots of attention. Can he push N'Keal Harry?
I think he can a little bit. I like that kid. He's long. He had a couple drops the other day, but he's been very consistent. He's light on his feet. He knows how to make plays. On contested catches. He's a really good route runner. That's sort of where he separates from N'Keal. So ultimately, it might be all right. Well, what are the Patriots looking for? Do they still want to try this power wide receiver thing that didn't work with Mohamed Sanu and it's not working with N'Keal Harry, or do they want to go back to sort of a Brandon Lloyd type wide receivers? That's who Wilkerson sort of reminds me of, body type and how he plays. Do they want to go back to that?
All right, let's stick with wide receivers. Jacoby Myers reportedly getting better as the days go by. What's his ceiling this year, Greg, with everybody else that's been thrown into the mix offensively?
Nick, I love Jacoby. He did get off to a slow start in camp. He's been much better of late. He does show up in all the time in the meaningful drives in camp, the competitive drives. So that should be important. That being said, I see him ideally as a number 4, maybe a number 3 at times, and that's in a 2 tight end offense where you're really going with the top 2 most of the time. He's a good, solid player to have around. I just don't know how much more his ceiling is.
All right, and finally, before we get to the member question of the day, is Jonnu Smith a better blocker or much better blocker than you anticipated?
He's a much better blocker than I anticipated.
Nice.
Like the dude gets after it. He keeps his. I love how he keeps his rear end. In a good place, nice and low, flat back. He keeps the feet moving. Like he's got really good technique. He's a lot stronger than I really remember him with the Titans. And I wouldn't say he's Gronk or anything like that, but for his size, and he's a little bit undersized for the tight end position. The guy can get after it. I'll give him props.
All right, let's get to the BostonSportsJournal.com member question of the day. Check him out over at BSJ, $39.99 on the annual plan. Top-notch analysis of all the pro sports in Boston, including the Celtics. I mean, Brad Stevens, woof, he is on a heater this offseason. And you can look at the hockey stuff, O'Connor as well. Of course, the Bees losing Krejci overseas. That one is a tough one. But all the great analysis at BSJ. And, of course, as a Patriots junkie, like all of you are listening to this podcast, you get video analysis that Bedard does on the coach's film, and you get direct access to him in the weekly chats. The weekly chats, that's where we pulled the member question of the day. And so what we have is from Pangelone or Pangeline or Pangaline. Here's the question. And it goes off of what you had written and said recently about N'Keal Harry, Greg. You mentioned that you'd like to see Harry report to camp in great physical shape just once. Great in all caps. Really bring the emphasis, baby. And Pangalone, I don't know, asks, this particular criticism of Harry is new to me. Has this ever been mentioned before at BSJ or via any other media outlet?
Okay. So I wanted to pull this question as a talking point, but first of all, on BSJ and the film, we won't have the coaches' film for the preseason, but trust me, if you're looking for a time to join, now is the time. Now we're gonna have actual footage of preseason games, and I'm gonna be breaking that stuff down at BSJ all the time, the couple days after the game, giving you stuff that you're not going to find anywhere else in terms of what to look for with the Patriots and sort of all the stuff that informs my views on the team. On N'Keal Harry. So I've always thought that personally, like looking at N'Keal, like, look, he's a big, strong guy. It's great. Yeah, his body's a little soft, and it continued to be soft this year. Where I'm just like, I don't understand. Like, why isn't he trimmed down? Why isn't the body fat a little bit lower? When you're trying to be a wide receiver in the National Football League, that's kind of par for the course. And I don't want to take credit for this thought because, and Penguin is asking like, well, where's this coming from? Well, I've always thought that, but looking for another outlet that said this, Mike Lombardi, who is plugged in with the Patriots.
Belichick's guy.
His son, Mick Lombardi, is the receivers coach of the Patriots. He coaches N'Keal Harry. Now, I'm not saying Nick is telling his dad anything. I don't know. Mick's a really good guy. He's a good coach. But I just remember Mike Lombardi on his podcast when they talked about N'Keal Harry's trade requests. He basically said, why don't you try showing up in good shape once and then make a trade request? Like try doing all that you're supposed to be doing, and then we could talk about a trade request. That's basically what Mike Lombardi said. And so if you were looking for somebody else as evidence that this is an issue, I think Mike Lombardi's a pretty good source on that stuff.
Well, there you have it. Big game tomorrow night for N'Keal Harry. All of them are big for him with where he is right now with this team. So preseason game number 1 tomorrow night. I know Greg will be back later in the week to recap it. I'm going on vacation for a few days. So all of you that hate me, you will be happy. I will not be on the next podcast. You get ready and watch that game tomorrow night. Have some fun. It should be, listen, it's football. Football's always fun. And this year, it's a little bit different, I feel like, for Patriots fans because you've got Mac. And I think, there's a reason to watch these games and actually care about them. And that is Mac Jones and see how he progresses and what he looks like by preseason game number 3. He's Greg Bedard. I'm Nick Cattles. This is the Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast.